Hello, everyone. I am Asha Nayaswami and just about to move in range of the camera. There he is. What do you know? Keshava Betts, who's going to chant for us. And then we're going to continue with this absolutely wonderful book, In Divine Friendship, Letters of Counsel and Reflection by Swami Kriyananda. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yoganandaji, Saints of all religions, humbly we offer our lives in devotion and service. Guide us, that we may feel your presence inwardly. Take us into the heart of your loving presence, that we may know that every decision we make, every action we take, every thought we think is permeated with your unconditional love. We are here in this world doing our best. Guide us, bless us, bring us into the comfort of our divine home. Om, peace. Amen.
I will drink thy name and get all drunk. Oh, with thy name I will sing thy name. I will drink thy name and get all drunk. Oh, with thy name. Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. I will sing thy name. I will drink thy name and get all drunk. Oh, with thy name I will sing thy name. I will drink thy name and get all drunk. Oh, with thy name. Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. I will sing thy name. I will drink thy name and get all drunk. Oh, with thy name I will sing thy name. I will drink thy name and get all thy feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. In the forest thou art green. In the forest thou art green. In the mountain thou art high. In the mountain thou art high. In the river thou art restless. In the river thou art restless. In the ocean thou art grave. In the ocean thou art grave. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. To the serviceful thou art service. To the serviceful thou art service. To the lover thou art love. To the lover thou art love. To the sorrowful thou art sympathy. To the sorrowful thou art sympathy. To the yogi thou art bliss. To the yogi thou art bliss. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. Oh God, beautiful,
Let's be silent and meditate for just a couple of minutes. Om, peace. Amen. That was lovely chanting. All right, my friends. So here we go again, plunging in. We never know what Swami's going to be talking about next. We are still in the section which was called Advice and Encouragement. Is that where we are? Yes, we're still in Advice and Encouragement. And I think we have several more weeks to go of advice and encouragement. Goodness, and then we get into judgmental attitudes. Oh my. Okay. So, this was written around 1990. I have no backstory on this one at all. It just is what it is. It says, this was written to a person who was discouraged by certain Ananda village guidelines. I'm so sorry, Swami writes, I'm so sorry you took our conversation the way you have. Obviously, well, actually, the context of this, as you'll see as I read this, is that somebody wanted to move to Ananda village, but took exception to whatever was being asked of them. I don't know what the specific rules are, but whatever the rules were, they didn't think they should have to follow them or didn't want to follow them. I'm so sorry you took our conversation the way you have. Truly, I want you to find the right situation for yourself, one in which you can be happy and at peace, and can continue your search for God. What I asked of you was what we ask of everyone. Surely, if you look at it impartially, you will see that it is what we have to ask of everyone. Indeed, your very rebellion at doing what I asked of you indicates the serious difficulty you would be likely to encounter in living here. The ability to fit in with a large group of people, most of them younger than you, people who already have their own self-definition, clarity of purpose, and a definite momentum of their own. Swami says, in the rules for living at Ananda, he says basically community living is not for everyone. He said community living is not compatible with too strong a sense of self-determined independence. Because once you live in a community, the impact of your life is greatly impacted by others. And if you're very strong in your right to do things your own way, community is really not necessarily for you. So that's what he's saying. Your discouragement over my requirement, which I expressed to you with love, and which was, I think, based not only on normal Ananda requirements, but also on common sense, suggests that you would not find it easy to fit in with those requirements, which are normal to any community, and particularly to one of our size. It makes me think that the best thing for you might be to go in with one or more people who are buying land near Ananda. I imagine it would be possible to have a situation that would cost you very little. In this way, you could work with the community and gradually build a relationship on many levels that would help you create your own degree of involvement. Where that might lead in future is anyone's guess. The way to win, and so Swami is first just being practical. He's showing us several aspects of leadership in the community. One of them is we're just not for everybody. I mean, I've sort of had a principle in the community that I've been a part of here in Palo Alto for all these years, and I often phrase it as we really shouldn't chase people. If they come to us, if they want to be with us, if what we're doing pleases them, that's wonderful. If they grow disenchanted and we're not able, by ordinary common sense means, to win them back to enthusiasm, and we don't have to chase them, if that makes sense. And that's sort of what Swami is showing here. Whoever he was felt, I for some reason think it's a he, but maybe not, whoever it was felt justified in rebelling against what Swami asked. And Swami said, this is what community is. You don't have to like it. You don't have to take it. But he's trying to be helpful because apparently, because this person is older, perhaps they've been a disciple of Master for a long time. Perhaps Swami felt that it would be beneficial to them at this stage of their life to have satsang. But he says, put yourself outside of the boundaries of Ananda, then you will have the freedom to self-determine. Because if you live within and keep insisting on self-determined, it'll be nothing but conflict. Very practical. Swamiji was always kind, but also very practical. And so I was saying in the context of learning from Swamiji, because everything I've done, I've tried to model it. Really, Ananda is not for everyone. And even though those of us who love it, it really isn't for everyone. It's a very, very, very big world. And people can find spiritual benefit in many situations. I often say when people come for the first time, like at a Sunday service or something, when we used to meet in person, which I hope, God willing, we will again, and people will tell me how much they love the service, how they're new to Ananda, they're taking classes. And I always say, for many of us, this has proved to be an absolutely ideal spiritual family. I said, for your sake, I hope that it turns out to be for you what it has been for so many of us. And that's my honest prayer, but I can't make it so. I can't make it be that for you. I just pray that you have the good karma to find the happiness either here or somewhere else, but here if possible, that many of us have found. And so Swami's encouraging this man, do what you need to do, because Swami's also saying simply and kindly, because we're not going to change for you. Swami implies there, I'm so sorry you took our conversation the way you have. That's the first sentence of his letter. Swami's response. So the letter that came must have been a criticism and a complaint and some kind of a negative statement. So Swami's having to respond to his negativity. And he's responding by saying, we did what was appropriate. And if you could look at it impartially, see, Swami's so kind. Surely, if you look at it impartially, and he doesn't say, you're being willful, you're being impossible, there's no real corrective in here at all. He just suggests, Swami just presents in a positive way what our reality is and leaves it to the man to choose it. But there's no insult implied. There's no put down. There's just, these are the conditions, this is what we have to do. In this way, Swamiji, in the way he worked with all of us, always was able to correct and guide us without making it into a personal attack. He was immensely skillful in doing that. But now Swami gives him a little advice. The way to win in any situation is to show courage and to begin at the natural point of entry. So this is Swami also saying, you can live outside, you can define what is appropriate, what is your natural point of entry here. If one believes in himself, he eventually finds for himself the niche he has earned. No one should seek anything for himself that he hasn't rightfully earned. Now again, Swami's not saying you in this. He's just saying the way to win in any situation is to show courage. If one believes in himself, he eventually finds for himself the niche which he has earned. So now we're getting to read between the lines. This person must have asked for some kind of special favors on the basis of who knows what. This is who I am. This is what I should have. I'm guessing. Maybe he was asked to take a training program. Maybe he was asked to, live in a group house. Maybe he was asked to do things like that, and he obviously claimed that none of those things were appropriate for him. And Swami says, if one believes in oneself, you will find your niche. You will find the niche that you have earned. No one should seek anything for himself that he hasn't rightfully earned. Now, depending on the receptivity of who this person is, he can read this whole letter and never notice those lines. These are the kind of lines that when you save a letter from Swami Kriyananda and 15 years later you look at it and you say, oh my, look what he said to me, after a whole lot of things have happened to you, and all of a sudden you realize that he told you that a decade ago. I've certainly had that experience. It was said to me, but I didn't hear it. Or I heard it like this when it was really meant the other way. And so Swami just leaves it. That's That's how a true teacher teaches. We have this picture of gurus as being so, telling you what to do, but they don't. Because what would you gain? If you have to be coerced into doing the right thing, as soon as the pressure is off, you'll just go your own way. Or you'll suppress your own resentment at being told what to do. If on the path of self-realization, if everything you give to God and every act that you take, it has to be a committed act of free will. You may have to discipline yourself. You may be cooperating with wise advice that you don't quite understand, but you are willingly cooperating with that wise advice because your experience has told you that it's a good idea to do it. You're not doing it because he said so. Swamiji himself lamented to me once. This was about prosperity and creativity we were talking about, and he said it's very frustrating for him. He said a lot of times he'll just put out a lot of ideas just to get energy moving, to get people thinking creatively. And he said sometimes, his ideas are not the best. Someone will have a better idea, but they'll almost resentfully do what Swami asks and then blame him when it doesn't work. And part of the reason could be because it wasn't the best idea, but it's also because that kind of attitude has no magnetism. So if we're only following the teacher's advice because we have to, then there's just we don't attract grace, what to speak of prosperity or success through that attitude. So Swami is, touching on those issues here. What I was going to say is, people always think about Sri Yukteswar as being so stern, because somehow that's the picture that's been generated. But in one of the most telling stories in Autobiography of a Yogi, when Sri Yukteswar took a liking to the young man Kumar, whose charms were lost on Master and on other of the ashramites, Kumar wanted to go visit his home village. And Sri Yukteswar knew it would be disastrous for him spiritually to do that, because he was not secure enough on the spiritual path, and in the worldly environment of his erstwhile companions, he would develop bad habits. And Sri Yukteswar saw the whole thing. But when Kumar ignored Sri Yukteswar's gentle hints, that's what it said. I think I have the name right, Kumar, but it doesn't matter, the young man. He said when the young man ignored Sri Yukteswar's gentle hints, his entire spiritual life was on the line. And in fact, when he came back from his village, he had fallen into bad habits, and Sri Yukteswar asked Master to ask him to leave, because he wasn't suitable for him to be in the ashram. But all Sri Yukteswar offered was gentle hints. Because if he had ordered him to do it or not do it, he might have complied, but the suppressed resentment would just, as Swami says, come out in some weird way later, and nothing would be accomplished. So when we're working with people, this is why I say, don't chase people. You hold out your hand, you offer it. But if they don't see in what you're offering something attractive to them, they have to awaken to that on their own. Of course, everything should be applied judiciously, but it is from Swami that I learned that. Ananda is not for everyone. And Ananda is strong because people have chosen it rather than had it foisted upon them. So then his last paragraph, he says, "You have my love and support. Pray deeply that you receive the guidance and the opportunity you crave to live ever closer to Master and God." Pray deeply that you receive the guidance. Swami doesn't tell him, again, he doesn't tell him what to do. You crave to live closer to devotees, but the opportunity is right there in front of you in Ananda, and you're rejecting it. So pray for the right guidance. Swami doesn't even say he'll pray for it, he's just telling him what to pray for. Very, very interesting. All right. And this is on December 31st, 1988. So the summary is, you are always part of our Ananda family. Swami writes, "I think there may be something in you that makes it difficult to cope with anyone having authority over you." Let me just see what he says here. "I don't know if this is the person I'm thinking of. It could be. And if it isn't, it could be. There was this woman who came to live with us for a time, really a lovely woman, but exceedingly spirited and self-directed. And she just, she didn't fit in. She was, how do I want to say it? Well, she was rebellious by nature, and she just wanted to live her own life in her own way. And she didn't have bad habits, she just had different habits. She liked different music, she likes more rajasic lifestyle, but she was a real devotee. In fact, she was a great devotee, but it wasn't a match. I think there may be something in you that makes it difficult to cope with anyone having authority over you. You have an independent nature, and while you love Ananda and are loved by all of us in return, I think your own fulfillment demands that at this time you work independently as you have been doing. And you see where Swami puts it? I think your own fulfillment demands this. You know, you're not going to be happy trying to fit in here. You have an independent nature, you don't like authority for your own sake. He said, you know, you love Ananda and we love you, but it just doesn't work together, it doesn't mesh. I hope this separation from us will not be permanent, for indeed it is a virtue to be able to work cooperatively with others. It would help round you out as a person. Now, he is giving specific advice, but see how gently? It's a virtue to be able to work cooperative with others. It would round you out. He doesn't even say it's a fault in her. He just says it's a virtue to do this, and it would balance your nature very nicely. But still, he leaves it all in the positive. So she can aspire toward it because it would round me out, rather than, oh, I'm such a terrible person because I can't do it. I mean, it's just so simple. He just makes the same thing, but he states it in an affirmative way that a person is inspired to move toward, instead of a negative way that makes you feel suddenly discouraged. So, for this time, however, and given, among other things, your age, which implies young, and your need to discover your own potentials, do be on your own. I see you visiting us, but having your own space. So he's just described a very agreeable lifestyle in which love is still present, but lifestyle is different. You always have my friendship and support. I pray above all for your continued deepening attunement with God. Do visit us as often as possible. I hope that in future we'll be able to work more closely together. You will always, in spirit, be a part of our Ananda family. And he signs it, Master's Love. Isn't that a wonderful letter? That's a letter saying, no, you can't live in this community anymore. No, it's not going to work for you to be here. I really don't think you fit. You don't know how to get along with people. You're intensely rebellious. You really want to do it your own way. But why would I not love you? Why would I not want you to be part of the family? Why would I not be happy to see you? You see how incredibly open-minded and undogmatic Swamiji is? It's not like, well, if you don't make it here, that's it. We never want to see you again. You failed now spiritually. This was your golden chance. None of that. Swami really liked spirited people. He actually said he much preferred an honest argument than a mindless yes. Because if people were actually engaged, he could work with them. If they were just acquiescing, there was just nothing there to work with. It's completely the opposite of the way many organizations run, where they just want you to conform to how it's supposed to be. And I knew another woman who was involved with another spiritual organization, and she said, I figured out very quickly what they wanted from me, and I just became that person. And she said, and as a consequence, I rose quickly in the organization. But she said, I saved enough of myself that after more than 20 years, I still existed and I was able to leave. So she did. But that's what is usually asked of us. In Ananda, it doesn't work. I mean, there has to be, as the former letter says, there has to be a modicum of impartiality that can see that there are some necessities in an organization. We have to cooperate with each other. I mean, that's what happens. You link your fate with other people. You have linked your fate with other people. And so a certain amount of cooperation is required. That's in the guidelines for Ananda membership. It says very simply, too great an affirmation of personal independence is not compatible with living in a community. And this person had too great an emphasis on personal. But everything about this letter just would make a person feel great. I've got Swami as my friend forever, and I can just go out and do what I need to do. I mean, Swamiji's relationship to people was, well, actually, he was asked once in the course of the lawsuits that we had. One of the questions that he was asked in a deposition was, what is the job of the spiritual director? Let's see, would spiritual director be the right word? But in any case, his position as the leader, that might have been the word they used. He said, to protect the interests of the individual from the institution. That's how he put it. I mean, that's also as distinct from the general manager, but that's what the spiritual director is there for, is to make sure that people's spiritual welfare is always foremost. The organization has its needs, and that's why Swami set it up that there would be a manager who would take care of the practical side, but a spiritual director who would always keep his eye on the spiritual welfare. Because sometimes the spiritual welfare is incompatible with the needs of the organization. Last week, in a different letter, we were talking about the context was completely different because we were talking about someone who may have been slightly mentally unbalanced. But Swami used the phrase, maybe they don't welcome him in the ashram because he has to be supervised too closely. He takes too much supervision, which I thought was a very careful way of saying the same thing, because there are needs. An organization has needs. And if it's going to function, a community has needs. If it's going to continue to function and not fall apart trying to be all things to all people, lines have to be drawn. So this letter and the one that came before it actually are really compatible. There are certain requirements for living in a community. If you look at it impartially, you can see that they have to be done. Nobody is singling you out. This is just the way it has to be done. But the first letter he said, but you don't quite fit. And to this lady, he's also saying, but you don't quite fit either. But you'll have a glorious spiritual future. It's just not going to be in this context because this is who you are. So this is masterful spiritual leadership, because this is what I was going to say. At the end of the life of Jesus, he says something like, and none of the sheep were lost, except the one who chose to be lost. And he was speaking then of Judas. But it's like Jesus was looking back over the ministry that he had, and he was counting up. He was keeping score. He was figuring how did it go? Now, what did we do on the Battle of Kurukshetra? And his definition was none of the sheep were lost, because that was his responsibility. One incarnation, you can't really accomplish that much. He was there to help his disciples, and he helped all of his disciples. With Swamiji, I watched it many times. It was essential for him to preserve the relationship with people. It was not necessary for him to correct them or teach them anything in particular at the cost of the relationship. Because as long as he could remain connected to them, everything eventually would work out. But if in some way he took a stand that caused them to reject his input, then so much would be lost, it wasn't worth it. And sometimes, I think I've said this at other times, Swami would use others of us to deliver bad news. I mean, I wouldn't come and say, Swami told me to tell you, but he would suggest that one or another of us might suggest to someone that this would be a good idea, but we wouldn't credit Swami with the idea, and Swami would not say it himself. And then sometimes the ironic thing would happen would be that the person that we were trying to help would go to Swamiji and complain about what we'd said. But that was fine, because our relationship with the person could be sacrificed as long as Swami's was preserved, because he was the link to Master. And so when Swami would give advice to anyone, he would always think, meditate, pray, what will really help this person. Not what could be said, what is even true to say, but what will genuinely help this person. And often what would genuinely help was for Swami to make it very clear to them that he understood and was their friend. If I were going to just sort of say what my relationship with Swami was, I think that's how I'd put it. He understood me, and he was my friend. That's, that's what he was. And that never, I never, ever, ever had any question to doubt either of those things. How much did Swami not say to me that he could have said to me? How will I ever know? But he did what he came to do, which was he understood me and he was my friend. And is also, for all of you who've never met him, it's very important to say that. He's more accessible since he left the body, even than he was when he was in it. So, this is a very fun one. This happened around 1990. Kriyananda explains why he's returning a friend's gift. I happen to know the context of this one. This happened around 1990, huh? But the origin of this goes back at least 10 years or more than that. There was a woman who she actually died quite a few years ago. She was a well-known artist. She was a good artist and well-known, and her paintings were quite valuable over time. But her style and her taste were not classical. It was rather modern, and some of her stuff was lovely and some of it wasn't, depending on the eye of the beholder. And she very lovingly gave to Swamiji a very large painting, which was very striking, and to his eye and also to mine, odd. Not necessarily something that he would have chosen for himself, but because she was a devotee and a good friend, he accepted it with gratitude. It was also a valuable gift because her paintings were quite valuable. I mean, I don't know, I don't think it was in the tens of thousands, but it was definitely in the thousands. So for her to just gift him with an original was quite an honor. Also in the context, this woman met her husband at Ananda. I think Swami may have introduced them and also did their wedding. So that's the whole context. However, there came a time when Swami needed money, as we always needed money, and he didn't really have a place for the painting. So he put it up for sale. But because she was well known, she found out he was selling it. And she was quite upset about it. I am sorry to hear that you are upset. I like what you made and the energy you put into it, and I like you. When I gave you my friendship, it was forever. Your anger with me doesn't affect my feelings toward you. So that's the first response. She's written him an angry letter, he says back. I'm sorry you're angry. And he says, I like what you painted and I like the energy you put into it, because she had integrity as an artist. So it wasn't that she didn't give her all to it. It was really a matter of taste entirely. He said, when I gave you my friendship, it was forever. And Swami, that's not hyperbole for Swami. He said many times, he used this phrase once, I'm unusual, he said, in that the way I feel about people is not dependent upon the way they feel about me. He says most people, if someone withdraws their friendship, they withdraw their friendship in return. He said, Swami says, I never do. So he just said, when I gave you my friendship, I gave it to you forever. Your anger with me doesn't affect my feelings toward you. But what you've created is very large and doesn't fit in my house. What would you have had me do with it? The money I hoped to get from its sale would have helped pay for the new video equipment, through which I still hope to benefit thousands. It wasn't for personal gain. Now, what he's actually telling her is that you could have gotten the very, very good karma of your painting, could have gotten me this equipment, and then with this equipment, I would help many people spiritually, and you would have been the core of that. He doesn't emphasize that, but that's the very good karma of supporting a spiritual work. This is where the prosperity comes from tithing. And this is where when we give back to God, God gives back to us. I've had the fun of realizing I inherited a little bit of money from my father, which my father earned and my mother managed carefully. There wasn't there wasn't a lot of money in our family, but my father worked very hard, especially the last 15 or 20 years of his life, accumulated enough to give me a very pleasant sum of money, much of which, not all of it quite yet, but has been used, well, actually all of it that I've used has been used for Ananda, for various things at various times, publishing the books that I have, helping Swamiji do his television shows in India and things like that. I'm not saying this for any reason except very pleasantly, not very long ago, I realized all the good karma my father's getting. Because all he did was die and will the money to me. I did nothing. I did absolutely nothing to earn it. Not an ounce of my creative energy went into earning that money. He worked very hard. I watched him work very hard and very diligently and very disciplined for years. And then it ended up in my hands, and I got to use it, have been able to use it for wonderful spiritual benefit. And Swami's television programs in India, which I helped, my father helped, my mother and father, I should say. My mother didn't earn it, but she was frugal, so she helped manage it. Just all those people were help brought to God. And Swamiji, I mean, my father didn't have the capacity in him to bring anybody to God, but he did. He brought people to God because he worked hard, gave the money to me, and I gave some of it to Swamiji. Isn't that marvelous? So Swami is saying right here, I wasn't selling this so that I could, buy a new car or a fancy house. I wanted to buy video equipment, and this was a way to get it. I'm holding this asset that I can't use for anything. It doesn't even fit in the decor of my house. I could turn it into video equipment. I could help thousands of people. And you're angry with me? He doesn't make any sharper point, but, Swamiji, one of the things Swamiji says about writing in general and communication in general, don't tell people what they're supposed to feel. He said, especially in writing. He said, just put the facts in front of them. Describe the situation and let them make up their mind. Don't tell them how joyful they should be, how grateful they should be, how angry they should be. Just let them decide. So Swami just lays out, this is why I did it. This is what I was going to do with the money. This is what have been the result. He doesn't say, you should appreciate it. You should think in higher values. You should trust me more than this. Not a bit. Same thing I was saying just a minute ago. Just wasn't in him to coerce us. He merely invited, then we made up our minds because Swami didn't need us to feel a certain way. His friendship was not based on our listening to him. His friendship was based on the fact that we were children of God and Master had sent us to him. So then he goes on to say to her, you've been meditating some years now. This anger is unbecoming in a devotee. Now, look again. This anger is unbecoming in a devotee. He doesn't say, after all these years, you shouldn't be getting angry. I mean, that would be a very plain statement. You've been meditating some years now. This anger is unbecoming in a devotee. I mean, there could have been 100 other ways to say that. It's not that I hold it against you. We all have our moments when we fail to live up to the ideals we hold for ourselves. Still, for your own happiness, I hope you will take this outburst as a reminder to yourself to be more generous in your sentiments. Look at that phrase, to be more generous in your sentiments. Isn't that a master of wordsmithing? And less attached to the fruits of your labor, as Krishna counsels in the Bhagavad Gita. So he's being pretty specific here. Take this outburst as a reminder. Because of the disharmony now surrounding this gift, I would not want to sell it anymore, even if I were offered a substantial price for it. Isn't that interesting? Swami needs the money for the video equipment. It was a free gift. It was his to sell. But now there's disharmony. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to take money at this price. Swamiji also says, he said, again, I'm funny this way. He said, friendship is always more important to me than money. There's a story in Swami Kriyananda, as we have known him, about a situation that actually happened in another country, where a person who'd been a long-time friend of Swamiji's had access to a certain bank account. and actually took out of that bank account $10,000, which is a substantial sum of money at any time, and in the context, it was a very large sum of money. But Swami never even mentioned it to him. And that was when he said, I'm funny this way. Friendship is more important to me than money. Because this man had been a friend for a very long time, and had been a true and loyal friend for a long time. And Swami put it like this: I know he feels justified in his own mind, or he never would have done it. And Swami just didn't want to challenge that, because he knew if he did, it would be the end of the friendship. He said, if that money is meant to be ours, Divine Mother will give it back to us in some other way. So here's Swami saying, because of the disharmony, I wouldn't sell it now even if I got a lot of money for it, nor do I want to keep it, he says. I have asked their mutual friend to return it to you. I hope you will accept it with my love. I mean, what a solution. You have my best wishes and my friendship always. Please give my best also to your husband. And here Swami really puts in a warning, because the husband had been a friend of Swamiji's for many, many years. And so it was because of that tie. And please remember, finally, who it was who brought you together. It never helps to turn against the instruments of blessings in our lives. Once again, it never helps to turn against the instruments to blessings in our lives, the instrument of blessings. There's not a pronoun in there, is there? I mean, there's no you. There's nothing accusatory in there. He just puts it out. I remember Swamiji and I were having a conversation about something, and he was quickly summarizing an interaction he'd had with someone that I needed to understand. And he just said it in quick words, but then he stopped himself and he said, except that sounds accusatory. And his summary sounded accusatory. And then Swami said simply, I never speak in an accusatory way. I never accuse people of bad behavior. Because what does it do? It just makes them shrink in, feel bad, feel defensive, feel discouraged. But he says it never helps to turn against the instruments of blessing in our lives. And that's the last thing he says. He doesn't soften the blow after that. He says, in divine friendship. You see, also, many people would feel the need to soften the blow, but nevertheless, you are my friend. Not Swami, just there it is. He was so truthful, never hyperbole. He never flattered. He didn't accuse. And so you had this absolute confidence in him, that you knew what he said was absolutely true. You never had to ask him, whether he really meant it, or wonder if he was exaggerating, or wonder why he would say. I only ever heard him what I would consider flatter in one instance, when he praised this person, which seemed to me way out of proportion to their actual ability. And it's funny, because at the time it just like, what? Why is he doing that? But right after Swami died, the person just left Ananda and went out on their own, and is doing their own thing in their own way, and is drifting farther and farther from what it was that Swamiji had hoped for them. And I realized he was just trying to keep them. In that case, he was just really trying. And he also was trying to plant into that person's mind in the way that they would understand. That was the other part. I realized that person needs to be praised. And even though it sounded to me like flattery to my ear, it sounded too exaggerated. But for that person, it just made them feel like, well, I'll use the right words, like Swami really understood them. I'm actually realizing that as I say it right now, because that's how he could get across that he really understood them. To my ear, it sounded odd, but to that person's ear, it just sounded right. I mean, I watched him. He was a master at the way he, and I was going to say the way he handled us, but I want to put in a caveat to that. I remember someone came to Swami once, and they'd been reading a leadership book, some leadership book, and the leadership book had this suggestion: if you're going to have to correct someone, you should tell them at least 3 things that they've done right before you tell them the thing that they've done wrong. And the person was presenting this like, isn't that good advice? Swami said, that's so manipulative. And he said a sensitive person would see right through it, just like that. But so what I want to say here, which is really important, and this is just something, again, that I learned about Swami. Swami didn't calculate. He didn't sit and think it through. He didn't try to imagine how, what he could say and what you might respond. Swami was completely intuitive in the moment, and that intuition was based on his attunement with Master and his absolute unconditional love for people. And he had nothing at stake. He did not have an agenda. The boss sits down with the employee, he wants something from the employee. He's trying to make the employee behave in a certain way, so he has a technique for getting it. Swami wanted nothing but our well-being. No people are more important than things. No project was more important than our spiritual well-being. So when he sat in front of someone, it was just, how can I help you? And it was, how can I help you, just with no reservation. How can I help you? But help you according to God's will, not help you according to your egoic demands of me. Your egoic demands just didn't exist. And the Swami, as he put it, and as he explained it to me, he wouldn't calculate, but he trusted what came. He just trusted what came, because he'd been living for God for a long time, for many incarnations, and he just trusted that what came through him was what it was meant to be. So he could just be in the moment, and in the moment, what he felt to say. And he would always see, oh yeah, this is just right. It wasn't like it was a mystery, although sometimes, as he put it, it would surprise him, what came to him, but he trusted it. He mentioned once about someone, he said, so-and-so is having more difficulty with this than I am, Swami said, because I'm used to following my heart. I'm just used to it. I just know how to do it. A lot of us follow our hearts, but our hearts are not as wise as his was. So there's a point in between we have to find. So that letter was quite something, actually, because I knew about that situation, and I know that I saw this letter at the time. But reading the whole thing now, it's very touching. So, advice on meeting life's trials. Now, this is July 18th, 1990. Swami wrote a lot of letters in 1990, it seems. Okay, a lot of letters that made it into this book. Swami writes, I've often found that understanding comes to me not so often through ideas, counsel, etc., as through being with the right kinds of people and doing the right kinds of things. Mixing with people who are negative or who see life too much in terms of problems tends to influence one to see things in negative terms and to view problems as fixed realities on life's path. Isn't that an interesting way to put it? View a problem as a fixed reality rather than just something that's just come in for a while and is going to go away. So Swami speaks of good company. On the other hand, when you mix with people who are basically positive, and he conditions that, not because they live in a dream world, but because they meet life's challenges with courage. So I want to stop there for a minute. People who are basically positive, not because they live in a dream world. And this is always the fine line that really makes, I feel, Swami Kriyananda and Master's Path in general so different from so much else that floats around, that makes Ananda such a unique experience. Well, early on in Swamiji's discipleship to Master, at a certain point, Swamiji, he was in charge of accepting certain monks into the monastery, accepting those who wanted to join the monastery. It was Swamiji's job to say who could move in. And Swamiji, as he so wanted to share the life of the ashram, that he accepted people for whom it wasn't suitable. And when he'd made a particularly bad decision, Master said to him, I'm just going to have to give you intuition. And Swami said from that time, it was easier for him to sort of know who belonged and who didn't. But it was also at that time that Master said, you have to be practical in your idealism. Because what happened was Swami would see someone who had an aspiration to live as a monk, Swamiji himself loved the life that he was living, and he wanted everyone in the world to have the experience that he was having. So he would just want the man to come in and be one of the monks, even though it was perfectly obvious that this was really not a suitable choice for him. Swamiji said once toward the end of his life, he said, I know it's unrealistic, he said, but I like to think that if I just explain it correctly, if I pick the issue up from the right string, if I write about the spiritual life from enough different angles, everybody in the world will want to be on the spiritual path. And Swami said, I know it's not realistic. He said, but it serves me to think that way. And I always loved that because it gives him enthusiasm to keep on trying. But he wasn't being naive about it, because being practical in our idealism is fundamental to the spiritual path. Otherwise, you're well, airhead is the word that keeps coming to mind, but maybe that's not fair. But you just float around and you never really make progress. So Swami says to be around positive people, and then he qualifies that. Not because they live in a dream world in which they constantly affirm that everything's going to be okay, even when they're not putting out any magnetism to make it okay. They're positive because they meet life's challenges with courage. On the spiritual path, let me think about this. I'm pretty sure that in the course on how to be a disciple that Swamiji created to train the monks when he was in SRF, and then subsequently that we've often used here in all over Ananda. I was trying to remember. I did a year-long course on it. I think it was called, might have been called How to Be a Spiritual Warrior, something like that. It was based on Swami's Notes of Discipleship. It might be an audio recording. I recommend it because the course was so powerful. The first qualification to be on the spiritual path, and I'm pretty sure it was the first, was courage. I think devotion was second, but courage was first, because we have to face into the extraordinary project that is in front of us, which is self-transformation, and the extraordinary project of opening ourselves to God's grace. I mean, it all sounds good on paper until you're really there, and you really have to take these principles and use them to discipline our own inclination to blame others, to collapse in a heap, to give up, all of the things that everybody's tempted to do. We're just constantly tempted. That's just the way it is. But you have to have the courage to get up again and keep going. Otherwise, there's nothing to do. There's no way to make progress. On the other hand, when we mix with people who are basically positive, not because they live in a dream world, but because they meet life's challenges with courage, that association tends to make us strong in ourselves, to become solution conscious rather than problem conscious. The company of strong people influences us to discover ways to surmount our own problems. You know, I consider my friendships with Ananda devotees, after God and Guru, God, Guru, and Swamiji, my friendships and the people at Ananda are the greatest blessing in my life for 1,000 reasons, including that when I'm weak, they're strong. And the example of how they live is so powerful for me. I'm going to tell a story about Ananta, who's one of Ananda's founding members and has been a great mentor and friend to me all my life. And this is just as a classic Ananta story. And remembering this, I mean, I wasn't anywhere near him when this happened, but I have an association with him through the spiritual connection we have. The community in Sacramento is an apartment complex that was purchased for the sake of being an Ananda community. It was affordable because it was a little run down. And a lot of the people who lived there were transient, which was good because then we could move them out without guilt. We weren't really unseating people from a home they'd had for 20 years. They were transient. And some of them lived on the other side of the law. There were drug dealers there. There were people who made their living in other unsavory ways. And so it wasn't really a compatible situation. And they started easing those people out in various ways. I wasn't part of the whole situation. And some of them, because they were angry people who tended toward a more violent way of life, it was a little dicey there for a while. This one man, who I believe was a drug dealer, he actually, Ananta happens to be very big, just by the way. He's like maybe 6'4", 6'5". He's a big man, and he's strong. So this drug dealer, who had gotten, I guess, an eviction notice, or at least an invitation to move out, came into the manager's office where Ananta was, and he had a gun. And he actually just pointed the gun right at Ananta's chest. This is how the story is told. Ananta spread his arms like this and said, "Go ahead and shoot, but you're still going to have to move out." And I have remembered that so many times, because my gosh, what courage. Just like if someone slaps you on the right cheek, you turn to them the left. So you're going to come in and shoot me, just go ahead and shoot me. And also the courage in that context to have the presence of mind to just say you're still going to have to move out. I mean, when I feel cowardly, which I don't have that kind of courage. I have to work at that kind of courage. It doesn't come spontaneously to me. I think of that. I think of him, and I have satsang with Ananta in my mind. He also, because I'm praising him, he's not here to be embarrassed. He has a way of, no matter how bad it is, he laughs first. Keshava was telling me recently about a friend of his who also has a very positive attitude, and his mantra is, "This is good, this is good." No matter what's happening, car is broken down, this is good, this is good. Oh, I forgot my wallet, looks like my wallet was stolen, this is good, this is good. And there's just a tone to that I absolutely love, because you just start there, this is good, this is good. I'm going to figure out now why this is good, but this is good. And with Ananta, it's sort of like the more preposterous and awful the situation he does, before he does something about it, because he's full of action, before he does something about it, he usually goes, ha, 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 ha. Just like that. It's not a nervous giggle. It's like from his belly. More dream entertainment. Just more dream entertainment. And many times in my life, when something has been really bad, I try to laugh like Ananta laughs, or I like to hear his laughter before I get really serious. This is here for our instruction and our dream entertainment. That's what this world is about. It's not very entertaining a lot of the time, and a lot of the time we forget it's a dream. Positive thinking is courage, because then I know this is good, I can do something here, I'll find a way, I can do it. And if I respond with courage, that's the first challenge. Once I've responded with courage, I'm halfway to the solution, because I'm halfway out of the test. Because a lot of times the test is just to help us to discover, that we have this divine power within us, that we are not helpless, we are not weak. We may have to struggle, we may have to suffer, but you have courage underneath all that. Even if we don't even know how we're going to carry on, we know that we're going to carry on, or at least we're going to die trying. If we have to, we'll just die trying, and that's the way it is. This whole letter is advice on meeting life's trials. Be with people who are positive because they have courage. Doing the right thing means, among other things, finding work in which we can be creative, in which we can give of ourselves, in which we can be serviceful or useful to others. It involves trying to be helpful rather than trying to be helped. Perhaps this sounds trite, but I found that it works. So this person must be struggling with their work. I don't understand the segue, so there must be something in his letter. I think he's just trying to have him have a better attitude toward his work. It involves being helpful rather than trying to be helped. Perhaps whoever's writing this letter to Swamiji was complaining about the difficulty they're having at work. People don't support him. That's probably what I'm hearing here. Nobody lets me be creative, or whatever he's talking about. And then he says, How does one love? Perhaps that's the question that was asked. I think he's quoting from the letter that was written to him. How does one love? One simple, Swami writes, though I admit not easy answer, is to think more of others and less of oneself. Another way is to do things for others and not to wait for them to do things for you. Another is give them what you want from them in return: love, encouragement, support. So the trial that this person must be facing must have to do with work and with other people. You know, how does one love? And again, Swami just gives the simplest answer: serve. Don't think of yourself. Give to others what you want from them. And so there must be a syndrome here of sitting still and wanting the world to come to you, wanting what I want to come to me, instead of becoming the magnetism, becoming what I want. Because we sit there, I mean, just you think of it. I want somebody to love me. I want people to support me. What kind of magnetism is that? That's magnetism that just keeps circling around, thinking about oneself. It has very, very little attractive power. And the kind of people it does attract are not the people usually who are capable of giving to you, because there's nothing in your signal that matches that kind of person. If you wish to have these qualities in your life, you have to become a channel for them. You know, and the channel is blessed by that which flows through it. We imagine that fulfillment comes to us, but actually fulfillment comes from us. I'm not really sure that that really would stand up to careful examination, but we do find our fulfillment through giving. It's as simple as that. But it's not always easy. Courage, my friends. So now here's another really interesting one. This was written in 1999. This is called A Breakthrough Between Friends. And the between friends is Swamiji and the person to whom he's writing this letter. I was interested in what you wrote about my song, Life Flows On. Life flows on like a river that homes to the sea. I think I felt somehow that you didn't like this song, Swami writes. I didn't want to embarrass you, but it seemed to me right for you to express your true feelings and not be diplomatic about them. As I recall, my delight was in your expressing them, fairly and not unkindly. This was to me a breakthrough for you in expressing friendship. I was happy for that reason. What did the song matter? Isn't that an interesting letter? So apparently, this person did not like the song. Perhaps, and I have no idea because I have no idea of the context, perhaps it was even the person whom Swami wanted to sing the song. It could well have been, because otherwise, why would it matter that much? I mean, Swami writes a lot of songs, you don't like it. I'm going to imagine that there was something that happened. Maybe Swami asked them to sing it. They didn't want to sing it. And Swami could feel that fact. He knew it was true, but he didn't, as he said, I didn't want to embarrass you. So maybe he didn't want to put him on the spot. You know, somehow you can feel that somebody has something to say, but you know, they aren't quite ready to give it. So how did he put that? I think I felt somehow that you didn't like the song, but I didn't want to embarrass you. But it seemed right to me, right for you to express your true feelings and not be diplomatic about it. So perhaps he was prevaricating a little bit, not really wanting to say what he wanted to say. And Swami was going to wait until he had the courage to actually do it. And then Swami says, as I recall, my delight was your expressing your real point of view, fairly and not unkindly, but honestly, because it was an act of trusting Swami's friendship. That he didn't have to be diplomatic, he didn't have to pretend. I mean, this is where Swami said to me, I prefer an honest argument than a mindless yes. And far from wanting to surround himself with people who only agree with him. I mean, that's just a very, very, very dangerous position for a leader to get himself into, where to disagree is considered to be disloyal. Swami was just exactly the opposite. There's an interesting story, it's in my book, Swami Kriyananda as We Have Known Him, about Swami's effort with someone else to try to get them to understand what true friendship was. And the situation was actually very interesting. It was with a woman, not in, not a personal relationship of any kind. I mean, heavens, there's thousands of people in Ananda, and probably half of them are women. So it just happened to be with a woman because of the subject I'm going to explain. And this woman happens to be one of the wealthiest people in the country, perhaps in the world. And somebody who has that kind of wealth has a lot of power and influence in the world. It was inherited wealth, it was generational wealth. So this person had been raised in a family of generational wealth on a global scale, and had been constantly warned that nobody can be trusted because everyone wants your money. And because a lot of people did want that woman's money, she had a lot of people around her who just agreed with her all the time because she had the money, she had the power. So through mutual friends, Swami became acquainted with this person, and they lived elsewhere in the United States, outside of where Swami lived. And he went there to the city where she lived a few times, and she had him as a guest in her home. I don't know if it was on the first or second visit. I don't know when it was. But this is the story as Swamiji told it to us later. He knew that, for one thing, she was very lonely because she suspected everyone. And that's how she'd been trained by her family to always suspect. You never know people like you for yourself. They could be just after your money. And family money, people are often very protective of family money. People who earn money through their own creative energy are often much more relaxed and free with it because they earned it themselves. So they know where it comes from, and they know that more can be generated. But if you've only inherited it, it's a passive receipt. You don't know where it came from. And so it's a wholly different feeling about it. When I was talking about what I inherited, it's important to me, the fact that I did nothing. I did nothing to create that wealth at all, except have the good karma to be born into the family. Wealth is not the right word, but the money that was given to me. I did nothing to create it. When we receive an inheritance, it is our karma. If we invest that smartly into an enterprise that succeeds, but all we've done is give our money, it's not our creative contribution. It's not our hard work. It's our good karma, and it might even be a certain astuteness in us. But it's an interesting question. Swami actually addresses it in his Money Magnetism book about passively created wealth versus creatively created wealth. And just it's among the subtleties of karma, what's appropriate, what isn't. But coming back to this, so this woman was in a very, very difficult karmic situation, really, and there was no reason to think she was selfish or anything like that. But this just was her nature. So Swami was there, and he spent enough time with her that there was some friendship, and she had an interest in Ananda. But Swami wanted her to know that he was not going to be someone who would just tell her what she wanted to hear because she was rich. So she had a particular bias toward certain feminist issues. And God knows, and God does know, that Swamiji was about the most gender-blind person I've ever known. And there has never been the slightest prejudice at Ananda on the basis of gender. It simply doesn't exist. I literally counted up once to see how many men and how many women had positions of responsibility, and it was pretty much 50-50, and not because it was couples. It was just if you're capable, you do it, and if you're not capable, you don't. There's just nothing has ever happened. Among the preposterous charges in some of the litigation we had to go through was that Ananda was different than that, but it isn't. One of the reasons we had trouble with that litigation is that the charges were so ridiculous, we thought it would just take about 30 seconds to dismantle them. We were naive, but that's a different conversation. But in this case, now let me think, I was talking about Swami being gender blind. Famously, he was walking down the street one day with Nirmala, a woman in our community, and her husband, Nirmal and Dharmadas. They were all walking down the street, and they were in some retail shopping area, and there was a window display, and there was a dress that was The Swami's eye looked exceedingly unattractive. It just did not have anything nice about it. And there it was in this window. And Swami turned to Nirmala and he said, "If you were a woman, would you wear that dress?" And Nirmala said to Swami, "Well, sir, as it happens, I am a woman." And she said that no, and I wouldn't wear that dress. But it just became sort of a joke among us, if you were a woman, like, because it just wasn't in his mind. So in any case, and Swamiji, so I say that first, but a great deal of what happens when we get these political agendas, and I'm not trying to put anybody down or disrespect anybody's true complaints, but sometimes we get these agendas and we can get a little intellectually confused because we have our point of view and we want to drive it home. So she had an inclination to do that, and Swami knew it. So he just started speaking the way he would speak to us, as he has often spoken to us, just honestly and frankly about clarifying what is actually just kind of a knee-jerk reaction or a habitual, unthought-out response, and a really carefully considered point of view about what is appropriate and what is not. I myself, over decades, I'm so grateful to Swamiji, because so often I would just bring up some fuzzy-minded popular idea and just present it as if it made sense, and he would show me that there was a deeper and a clearer way to think about it. And it was exceedingly important, especially where there's emotion involved, or habit involved, or fads involved. So Swami was speaking in his way, just clearly and honestly, about certain issues that he knew she felt differently about. And he was giving reasons. But he was just being honest with her, because he wanted her to know that he was really her friend. Now, of course, she took it completely the opposite. And after Swami left her house, she made it known between their mutual friend that she never wanted to see him again. And Swami also said, far better that we have it out now. He said if she had become involved with Ananda, and even worse, if she'd actually given some of her money to Ananda and then discovered, how we were really going to be with her, which is that we were just going to be ourselves. He said that would have been terrible. He said it was necessary to bring it to the fore right away. Unfortunate for the woman, because, as he put it, he said, I think we really could have helped her, but it wasn't her karma to be helped. So there you have it. So in this instance, Swamiji's just delighted that somebody said, I think your song is lousy. He said, what do I care about the song? I just rejoice that you have enough confidence in yourself and enough confidence in my friendship that you can just be yourself with me. I mean, think about your own friendships with everybody. Isn't it wonderful when somebody trusts you enough just to be as they are, to really, really be themselves? Even to receive from you, to take from you. Sometimes I've had to say to people, trust me, I'm not going to offer it to you if I don't want to give it to you. You can trust me. I will tell you the truth, and you must tell the truth back to me. So that if you tell me that you want to do something or that you like something, I can believe you. And that was what it was with Swamiji, as I said so many times. You could believe him. There's just never any part of you that didn't believe him, because he wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. And I can't describe to you how relaxing that is. So, now, let's see where we are. I think we have time for one more. This is rather long, so we'll see how far we get. To a devotee facing a serious test. It's still 1990. A lot of things happened in 1990. Thank you for your letter. I'm so sorry things have turned out as they have, and pray that in the end, this story will prove a glorious one for you in your growth toward perfect understanding. See how sweet Swami is? I'm so sorry things have turned out as they have. He doesn't start by saying buck up, pull up your socks and straighten your spine. He starts in the most natural human possible way. I say this because what Swami is showing us is how to relate to one another. I'm so sorry that things have turned out for you in this way. But he doesn't stay there. He doesn't say, oh, you poor thing, this must be so terrible for you. I can only imagine how you're suffering. What a shame that you've had to suffer. This is the advice Swami gave us. Be sympathetic, be compassionate, but not too much. Because if people are going to live through it, they're going to have the courage to live through it. And you don't want to emphasize how much they're suffering beyond making it sure that they know that you know. He said, because you don't want to increase the thought in their mind that this problem is very difficult to solve. So he says, I'm so sorry things have turned out as they have, and pray that in the end, this story will prove a glorious one for you in your growth toward perfect understanding. He also gives the person lots of space to suffer. And I pray that in the end, this will prove a glorious one. So it's not like tomorrow I expect to see you at work with a smile on your face. It's in the end, this will turn out well. He gives the person hope. Self-reliance is an important quality. Many people, alas, have allowed this wonderful teaching of both Emerson and Thoreau to reinforce their own egos. That application of their teaching, unfortunately, simply does not work. Not to depend too much on the opinion of others is good, provided one's resolution is to stand firmly by truth. It's not good, however, if it means being simply stubbornly committed to one's own opinions. Self-reliance must be balanced by humility before that infinite reality of which we are all a part. Humility before that infinite reality of which we are all a part. Life has put you in a position where now you must face this lesson. That self-reliance is to stand firmly by the truth. It's not taking self-reliance to mean egoic independence. I'm putting all that in because I'm trying to figure out what Swami's saying here. Life has put you in a position where now you must face this lesson. Let us hope you will learn it well. If you do, as it seems you are earnestly disposed to do, then we must view your present trial as a great blessing, even though the trial itself is a hard one. So, apparently this person, I presume, was egoic, was stubborn, had a misunderstanding of what self-reliance really means, and as a consequence, apparently something really hard has happened to them. The implication here is that the person is aware of their weakness and aware of their misunderstanding. The reference to Emerson and Thoreau must be some understanding on Swami's part that that was a relevant reference to whoever he's talking to. So he also talks about self-reliance must be balanced by humility before the infinite reality of which we are all part. Life has put you in a position where now you must face the lesson. He gives him credit. If you do learn it, as it seems you are earnestly disposed to do, then we must now view your present trial as a great blessing, even though it's very hard. So Swamiji is just taking him through it, knowing apparently that there was some reason why he could say this. You've admitted that you have a great fault, and now that great fault has brought you to a great test. But if through this great test, even though it's going to be exceedingly difficult for you, you're going to learn this very hard lesson, then we're going to have to call this a blessing, aren't we? But Swamiji, taking the man by the hand, I assume man, I don't know, taking this person by the hand and walking them through that step by step. You see how powerful that is? A person could just go through that over and over again with the and see, this is where Swamiji's friendship, present tense friendship, the accessibility of that divine force, just helping us walk through this without, do you see in this? Without a hint of judgment. I mean, there's not the slightest bit. What a stupid thing for you to have done. Nothing like that. He only just says, self-reliance is an important quality. Many people, alas, have taken this teaching to the ego. Again, not you, but it happens, doesn't it? So the man can say, yeah, I know it happens. And he can say to himself, yeah, I understand. never accusatory. Let the person choose how they're going to feel. Our prayers are with you that you receive the highest grace through this experience and with as little pain as possible. Isn't that a nice prayer? May you receive the highest grace with as little pain as possible. I think that should be like a benediction that we all offer each other all the time, with as little pain as possible. And so Swami's, he's not saying that suffering is good for you, with as little pain as possible. And you feel this tremendous sympathy, but not too much, because we have to go through it. So it's like a good surgeon. This is going to hurt, but I'm going to do what I can, and you'll be better afterwards. I deeply pray that you will stand firm by your resolution to be humble. So this person must have confessed a lot. I deeply pray that you will stand firm by your resolution to be humble and to accept God's will in this matter, as in all things in your life. If you do, that which you find painful today will bring you great joy tomorrow. Any rejection, moreover, that you feel today, you will recognize tomorrow as the basis for an ever deeper friendship in God. May God bless you all always. Isn't that beautiful? I deeply pray that you will stand firm by your resolution to be humble and to accept God's will in this matter, as in all things in your life. If you do, there's just that little caveat. If you do, 3 little words, that which you find painful today will bring you great joy tomorrow. Any rejection, moreover, that you feel today, you will recognize tomorrow as the basis for an ever deeper friendship in God. May God bless you always, and may God bless you always.